Number one is, what is the ultimate goal of the company? This is going to sound simplified and obvious, but is it there to make money? Is it there to improve the lives of educators and students? The question then comes in is, how are you doing that? What are you doing and what is your tool, and how does your tool meet that individual need? So, for example, what are they doing to put teachers and students first and foremost? Is it going through that process of really building systems that take some of that repetitive load, the lesson planning, grading, basic content delivery off their hands so that students can do that high impact human work?
Welcome back for another episode of Education Matters. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Today's episode continues our Edtech series, conversations designed to help founders better understand how schools actually operate, how districts make decisions, and what it really takes to build something that lasts in this space. My guest today is Brad Fountain. Brad began his career as a teacher and school administrator before spending nearly 2 decades working inside the edtech industry. He helped lead the Model School for Technology in North Carolina as an administrator. He contributed to the development of one of the first truly digital textbooks that was used at scale across the US and globally, and has worked across curriculum design teams, AI integration, enterprise sales, implementation, and customer success. He has truly worked in all 50 states and has seen firsthand how districts adopt and abandon technology. In this conversation, we talk about where edtech companies often go wrong, particularly when they build products without sustained teacher input. We discuss the tension between usage metrics and real instructional impact, and why more clicks rarely means better learning. Brad shares his perspectives on AI, where it can meaningfully support teachers, where it's being added simply to stay competitive, and what districts should have in place before adopting AI tools at scale. We also turn the lens on school systems themselves and discuss how leaders can identify real instructional gaps before purchasing digital solutions, how they can evaluate vendors more rigorously, and why implementation planning matters just as much as the product itself. If you're building edtech tools or leading in education, this is a practical conversation about alignment, discipline, and long-term thinking. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Brad Fountain. Brad Fountain, welcome to the podcast. Where do we find you today?
I'm just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, Jason.
Awesome. And Charlotte's it's a great city.
Yeah, we enjoy it down here. It's actually warm weather. We had some snow recently, but nice and warm now.
You have no sympathy for what you consider snow from me, but
fair enough.
Awesome, Brad. Well, thanks so much for joining. We've known each other for well over a decade at this point,
yes,
and worked together, pretty closely for a number of years. So we're super happy to have you on because you've got some real unique insight into the education and tech space. And I would have given you a proper introduction by now, but can you let folks know what you're up to these days?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of work with some various edtech companies with regard to curriculum writing, supporting their needs with regard to how to use or when to bring in AI content into their edtech stratosphere, and kind of working with curriculum writing as well. So those are the main things I'm working on right now within edtech.
Fantastic, and we'll dive into a lot of that. But let's give the audience a sense of your background. So can you give me a sense of, let's start like where and when did you grow up, and what was childhood like for you?
So my childhood, I was most of my formative years, I was born in Atlanta, but I grew up mainly in Dallas, Texas. And so grew up in a kind of a really building, kind of bulging system of a city in Dallas. And my dad worked for the city of Dallas as the assistant city manager for most of my time, and went through public education all through the Dallas Independent School District. Matter of fact, I went into high school at a really unique high school there in Dallas at the time called Oh, and I'm drawing a blank of it. But it was a magnet program, and so what they did is we would spend 3 hours a day at high school on our core subjects, and then the rest of the time was in areas of focus, and it was everything from aeronautics to computer science at that time. And now this is many, many years ago. Computer science was in its infancy compared to where it is now. But yeah, so it was a really neat environment. And then I finished up my high school career in Connecticut when we moved up that way before heading to Florida for a couple of years for college. And then I finished my college career in North Carolina and finished up out in Wilmington with my master's degree in educational administration.
What prompted you to get into education?
I think, I've always been involved with kids, through high school, through college. I really enjoyed coaching. I really enjoyed working with kids day in and day out, seeing how you can have an impact on their lives repeatedly through just constant, reinforcement, having positive interactions with them. So many kids that I grew up with didn't always have that positive influence in their life. And my dad has always been a role model for me as a person growing up in Atlanta in the 50s and 60s. My dad actually took in a group of students who were all from minority backgrounds, and he had a baseball, football, basketball, soccer team that was all the same group of kids, and we would travel all over the state of Georgia, and he would have them coach them, mentor them as they work through. And some of those folks are still dear friends of my dad. My dad's up in his 80s now, but a couple of those guys are like brothers to me. And so seeing how an individual can have an impact on kids' lives at an early age and continue that impact throughout their lifetime is always going to be an area that I've been interested in. And so that got me into teaching, knowing that I could have that continual impact day in and day out with those students.
You've always struck me as somebody who had this sort of, natural interest in tech and education. And you mentioned you did some computer science in high school. Well, how did you get into tech? Was it just something that was emerging at the time and you were always interested in, or any mentors or role models there?
So I'm going to show my age even more than I already have. I started getting into computers and computer programming around 1978. I was about 8 or 9 years old. And we had an Apple II, not a 2 Plus or a 2E for those folks who remember that many years ago, but had an Apple II and would do some programming on that, and got into really how to utilize things like spreadsheets and pieces. My dad would obviously use those for his work purposes, but it was amazing to have access to that. And again, I know not a lot of folks had access to those kind of technology at that age, but because my dad was interested in technology and seeing where we could go, it kind of fed into my interest as well. And so then as I got into high school, wondering, how do you build video games? How do you build software? How do you get into really coding and programming? So those are all areas of interest that I kind of got into early on. Again, starting in 78 and then all the way through high school. It's an area of interest of mine. And then even when I got into teaching, it was an area I did some of the early, and again, showing my age here a little bit, but they were one of the first Edtech involvement pieces that I got connected with was a program called MayaQuest. And most of your audience will not even know anything about MayaQuest, but it was one of the first iterations of early ways to communicate with individuals out in the field who were conducting experiments. So what we had was this opportunity to connect with a scientist as my classroom could ask questions of the scientist, see video and imagery of what they were doing in central Mexico, and as they're exploring and excavating Mayan ruins. And then they would send pictures back and say, what do you think this was used for? What are your ideas on how this would be working? And so that was really kind of my early kind of utilization of EdTech in the classroom. That would have been 95, 96, somewhere around there, using that way.
And then we met at our time at Discovery, and you were one of the OGs when I got there, and probably did another close to 5 to 7 years more maybe than when I left Discovery. But can you talk about that process and how you actually got involved with what ended up becoming and is one of the biggest ed tech companies around?
Sure. Yeah. My involvement and connection with Discovery started back in 2005. It was pure by happenstance. It was a kind of a pure luck situation. For that time, I was took my teachers as a building level administrator in North Carolina, outside of the Raleigh-Durham area, and my teachers were all interested in going to what at the time was called NEC, N-E-C-C. Now, obviously, it's called ISTE, but again, showing my age there a little bit. And what we did is took a whole group of our teachers, one from each grade level, to experience kind of what some of the up and coming pieces around using technology in the classrooms look like. And so I had my teachers with me. My daughter at the time was just over a year old, and loved my wife, my kids, we all do, but at that early age of being a dad. After about 3 or 4 days there, I was like, man, I'm ready to go home and see my daughter again, missing my daughter. But I'd promised a group at Discovery Education I would come by and see their corporate booth. So went to their booth and went to one of their little sessions they had in a corporate room, filled out a random form. I didn't even really pay attention to it. We've all done that at conferences at some point in time. You're kind of just filling out the information. You're going to get mailers or email coming from that. That's all right. And I get a phone call while I'm at the airport with my teachers on the last day saying that we'd won the drawing. I was like, oh, that'd be great. Thinking I've won a year-round, subscription to Discovery Education's content, which we've been using, and our teachers really enjoyed using. But no, it was a trip for 2 to the Tour de France. This is back when Discovery Communications owned Discovery Education. So, yeah. So
I've never heard this story.
So what a trip for 2 to the Tour de France. And as we're going through, really got an opportunity to go see Lance Armstrong in his heyday, obviously before the scandal, which interrupted everything.
When he was cool for a hot minute.
Exactly. And sat down, and my wife and I and amazing gentleman I know you've had on this podcast before, Hall Davidson, who I dearly love and admire tremendously. He was our tour guide, and we toured around Paris, France, my wife and I. At that point in time, my in-laws took care of our daughter, so we still missed her, but it was fun to go see that and have that experience. And as we're there, Hall and I hit it off. They were just starting up the Educator Community Network, Discovery Educator Network. And Hall asked, why don't you come work with us? And so my wife and I talked about it on the flight back and said, always take a chance. You can go back to being an administrator if you don't like it. And that's what we did. We decided to go with Discovery Education and was there for about 20 years.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I had no idea. I mean, those Discovery Communication days were different with things like, let's go to the Tour de France. But I think it's relevant for the audience because of the kind of work you ended up doing at Discovery. You mentioned the Educator Network, which I know brought you up to Canada and probably just about every state. Like, was there a few that you never got to?
Nope, I hit all 50 states.
So this is, such an opportunity to present the audience with someone with such, breadth of the education system across the U.S., as well as somebody on the administrative side and then the Edtech side proper, to give folks a sense of, what the Edtech world is like, both in terms of development, implementation, building community. So, maybe we can start, Brad, if, with all these years of experience, if you were advising, I know you do some of this now, a young EdTech founder, what starting advice would you give to them about, what districts actually value and what founders oftentimes misunderstand?
Yeah, the first and foremost piece is it's not about the technology. It's not about the devices. It is about the teacher and it's about the student. And if we ever lose sight of those pieces from the company or business side, we've lost our audience. We've lost our purpose in doing what we're doing. And it's not just about making their life easier, but it's about doing things the right way. Ideally, in an ideal situation, what we're doing with educators is we're taking some of the rote processes off, the grading, some of those pieces off their tasks, some of the lesson planning pieces that can be automized to simplify those tasks. But we're not taking the creative pieces out. We're not taking the parts that challenge teachers to be a better teacher, to meet the needs of those individual kids day in and day out. The customization and personalization are the key components that we, when we're looking at what EdTech can do and should be doing. But the challenge we run into a lot of times is, as I'm seeing more and more across the industry, is we have a lot of folks who are building pieces out. And this is really, key today in the environment of, the influx of AI. And pretty much every company feel like they've got to be on the bandwagon of AI. And what I'm seeing is, to quote the old Jurassic Park movie, is so many people are asking the question, how can we do this? And they're not asking, should we do this? And that's a big challenge, is the way we're doing it, should it be done? And what is it doing to enhance educational opportunities? What is it doing to bring a better learning experience to students without taking away some of the things that are needed for students? And what I mean by that is, sometimes I think about, some of the environments and the tools that are out there. Let's go real simple. Let's go with Chat GPT. Let's go with some of the Gemini, some of those basic programs. As a student myself, and I'm sure, Jason, you've gone through this as well. I know I've had many conversations around these ideas. You read great literature, you read great content, you were involved. And I'll be very candid. As a high school student, I remember reading Canterbury Tales in Old English. Kill me now. It was brutal. It was not a fun experience.
Yeah.
But I look back on that, and there was a productive struggle that had to take place for me to understand, to comprehend, to really dive into what was happening. And right now I could go to Chat GPT and Google, or just ask them, what's this quick summary and the key components to chapter 1 or pieces of any part of any book, and I can get an answer to that. Is that good? Is that what we need our kids to be doing? And I would argue no. That's not what we want our kids doing, and that's not the what we want students spending their time doing, because it's not allowing them that productive struggle that we come through with different tasks that we're brought into in the classroom.
So for a lot of the founders that I've worked with over years and have got to know, I've realized that, and it's kind of surprising, but maybe not, that most of them in the edtech space do not have a teaching background like you did. What advice would you give to them to understand about, or to consider the realities of the classroom as the everyday that they might not be as intimately aware of or involved with?
One of the things that I always brought up and I talked to a lot, with my time with Discovery, is that teachers need to be brought into the conversation. And having edtech leaders, having edtech founders come in and listen to actually what teachers are saying they need. They know what they need better than anybody else out there. They know what the challenges are, what's taking time away from doing what they know they need to be doing, which is spending time with those individual students, customizing, personalizing for those kids. Spending lots of time, not one conversation a year, not 2 conversations a year, but going in and actually having those conversations, and then go even further. Go in, if you're building a product out, if you're building a resource, go in and actually see it being used. What is it doing? Now think back to your own classroom experiences. Is this enhancing what your learning experiences were, or is it taking away from your learning experiences? And if it's taking away, you need to have a conversation with yourself, with your company. How do we make it add to versus take away from those learning opportunities in the classroom?
So I know this is something that a lot of, especially early stage founders, struggle with. And that's getting pilots off the ground. But maybe pilots is already too advanced of a stage for what you're suggesting. Do you have any recommendations of how they can go about getting this feedback, getting this, kind of proof of concept on the ground with districts? And let's limit this to your experience in the U.S. because it can be different here in Canada.
Sure. If I was starting a company from scratch, building up, the first thing I would do is roadmap the pieces that we think, based on feedback we've heard from educators, from folks that I've been working with, what it should look like. And then I'm bringing in a group of teachers, and we have connections with, we have a relationship with, that are great educators. And again, 95% of all educators are amazing teachers, but we want to make sure we get the right folks who are ready to bring in that technology in the classroom. Not everyone's comfortable doing that yet, and that's okay. But bringing those folks in who are looking at that, who have a variety of experiences as well. You don't want just the brand new teachers who are coming out of college now who are great, but they have a lot of experience with technology. You want to find them teachers who are 15, 20 years in, the teachers who are 25, 30 years in as well, and have a nice mix of those folks. And let's lay out the roadmap of what we're looking to do and how we're doing it. Now, based on what we've got here, what feedback would you provide? And one of the biggest challenges I see with a lot of companies is they frame their questions in a way that they actually get the outcome they want based on the questions they're asking, versus asking very open-ended questions like, what is it, if we're going to be doing this, if we're going to be tailoring a product to really meet the needs of students at a customized level for math instruction, what are the key components of that? Leaving it open-ended, not showing you, here's what we're doing. Do you like this or don't you like this? Because now I've poisoned the well already. Having that conversation with them in a very open-ended manner that allows them to open your eyes to things you may not have even considered as a possibility or as a possible need from an instructional standpoint. Granted, you're going to get a list of things that not everything can be done. There's a limited budget. There's limited time. I understand that. But you want to see what's out there and then have a conversation. Once you've kind of basically taken that feedback, initial bit of feedback in, now go in and have another conversation after you've had some internal conversations. And what would you prioritize of these things? Now, we can't do them all. Let's just be candid. We know that, and that's okay. Teachers understand that. They get it. But if you're going to prioritize these, which one would be the highest? Which one would be the lowest? And prioritize those tasks. And then take that information to help determine what it is you're going to be building out and how you're going to make it work for teachers and students.
What are the other common mistakes you feel that ed tech companies make?
Yeah, as I alluded to a little bit earlier with the AI, but there's other pieces of that as well. They don't ask the question of, should we be doing this rather than could we do it? Some great examples that come to mind for me is there's a lot of places out there that do a lot with virtual labs and virtual experimentation. And there's a purpose and there's a meaning behind that in in limited situations. But think about, Jason, I'll ask you the question. Do you remember doing science experiments in your classrooms? As a student, right? You did those. Do you ever make a mistake, measure something wrong, do something wrong? We all did it, and it impacted our results. And we may have to had a conversation with our classmates. Well, wait a minute, why did yours come out that way? Mine came out this way. You have to backtrack and figure out where the mistake was made. When it's a virtual situation, you're limited on the mistakes you can make. And you can't have all those variables that can come into play of just a subtle little change in something that makes that mistake and has an impact on your results. But going through that process of that struggle of trying to figure it out, puzzling it back, walking through the pieces of the steps you went through to figure out, oh, wait a minute, I did A and then I should have done A, B, C, and then E. I went A, B, C, D, then E. Well, okay, then my mistake, that's where my mistake was. Going through that process is part of the learning experience. And those are skills that we take with us as we get into adulthood, is the opportunity to backtrack and figure out, okay, where was the mistake made? How can I improve it? How can I make it better? Versus simply clicking a button to get the results so that I can see, oh yeah, if you do this, 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 I get these results. That's great in some situations, but I would say very limited situations.
Yeah, I mean, and if I can double click on that.
Yeah.
You would, in that case, if you have a company where you're building virtual labs, you would also want to think about what's just good pedagogy.
Yes.
So how can the virtual labs support real life labs, right? Real life experiments. So maybe there's a component of that is part of the company that is not, not purely digital based, because I think your point is really at the key of all good teaching, right? Allowing for opportunities to make better mistakes and learn from your mistakes. So do you think there's a bit of an inherent, I don't know if contradiction is the right word, but, let's go with contradiction, where a lot of ed tech companies, the way they raise funding is by showing usage metrics and time on task metrics. But there's a bit of a confrontation with what actual good pedagogy is. So how would you help them navigate that? Like, they're trying to survive and get funding to keep building, but at the same time, more clicks and more virtual experiments is not necessarily going to make better scientists. So how can they think about that issue? Because it's a real one for tech companies as they're starting out.
No question. I mean, it's something the question we ask quite a bit when we're at Discovery is, what is your click-through rate? How many times does someone go in and how many resources they click on and all of those pieces? And I think it's a two-way conversation. It's a conversation at the company level, but then it's also a conversation with the individual districts. And I think sometimes that conversation can be challenging because, to your point, districts are looking at how much time is my teacher using this, And if they're using it a lot, we want to keep buying it. If we're not using it a lot, we're not going to use it. We're not going to continue purchasing it. But flip that conversation a little bit, it's on its head. How purposefully are they using it? Not just how many clicks are they, but how purposely are they using it? And what pedagogical degree, and how are they making sure that it's meeting the needs of the students and the teachers? Back to that point about the labs. And again, I'm not saying that all virtual labs are a bad idea. But if my teachers are going through and they're doing hands-on labs, which are off of screen, not clicking through pieces to get those hands-on labs, and then they come and spend a few minutes of, okay, we've got the basics of how the lab works, and we know what the basic variables are going to be doing, but I can't do 20 different tomato plants or 20 different genotype connections with the individual species. Now I go virtually. We know how the system works. We know the mistakes that can be made if you're not done right. But now I can go virtually, and I can actually go in and make some of these connections and do more experimentation at a quicker, more timely manner than what I could have done in my hands-on. Now, it may not be a lot of time on the device. That's okay. But what it's doing is it's building that. Now, we know the system, we know the science and how it works. Now, can we validate what our hypotheses are around certain outcomes we expect to happen based on what we learn on our hands-on experiment through this virtual experiment? And if it validates, okay, why does it validate it and how does it validate it? And it may be fewer clicks, and that's okay. It's a matter of how it's being used and when it's being utilized. I mean, right now, what is it? I think the latest data out there is 95% of teens have a mobile device. Screen time, to me, we're seeing a lot in the U.S. a pushback on screen time, and I don't disagree at all with that. Right. It needs to be limited to purposeful, meaningful time. And there's a lot of time that needs to be built on around things that are off screen time, tasks that we can't do on screen. I can do screen time for homework. I can do screen time for a lot of our other purposes. But in-class instruction time, it's very different, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion, a tremendous amount of screen time.
Yeah. And so if I can pull that back, I'll give you a thesis and you can agree or disagree with it. That ultimately the role of the EdTech company to become very successful is not just having the student or teacher absorbed within the device, but actually making the teaching and learning more fruitful. If you do that, you will be a successful company. It might take longer. It might be a more arduous process. But if you're ultimately contributing to a better classroom, that is how the company will succeed in the long run.
Exactly. And I would just add on to that, the more we can individualize and meet these kids where they are. There are certain things we can do with technology for kids with special needs, special disabilities, or language challenges that we deal with that can be enhanced and brought upon with technology that will improve the instructional opportunity, or again, more ways to individualize based on different levels of kids coming in the classroom that we can do that with. That makes sense because that's taking that task off the teacher, who now can focus in on teaching that student versus translating it or trying to get the kid to understand the English piece of that, or modifying the lesson to make it easier for that kid who has a disability. Now they can spend on time actually doing the instructional pieces of that versus spending their time trying to modify it.
Exactly. Okay, so before I turn from the district perspective and try to provide administrators with some insight on how to adopt EdTech, one more question about the founder space and the EdTech space. You have an awesome science background and always supported me in the science work that we did at Discovery. So maybe it's in that field, maybe it's in others. Where and what kind of opportunities do you see on the horizon for EdTech companies? Like if you were jumping in and going to go build an EdTech product, what area do you see a lot of opportunity, a lot of interest, a lot of potential?
I think there's a couple of areas, Jason. One of those areas would be in the lesson planning component of it, building out dynamic, engaging, interesting lessons with teachers so that they have the key components that are being met instructionally from the standpoint of their standards, their content, their skills are being addressed. But then now they can spend their time, instead of building the core pieces of it, they can spend their time on the creative side of it. and making the lesson more dynamic, more experiential, and more engaging for students, but taking the key components off to give a basic foundation. I see this now. I didn't mention earlier, my wife's a teacher. She's got over 30 years experience teaching in a classroom. And one thing she tells me that she uses, a variety of tools for is doing just that, going in and building out, here's the structure I need. Okay, here's an idea. Now I'm going to go in and tweak it this way because I know my kids need this. My kids have this need. They have this challenge. I know instructionally this fits for me. So now she takes that and really enhances it to meet the needs of her kids where they are, versus something that's much more structured and much more of, hey, go sit over on the device here and click through this and do this lesson and do this activity, because there's not a lot of growth there. There's a lot of companies that do that, and that's not where the growth is, I think, for the future of EdTech.
Well, remind me to get your wife access to my good friend's platform. Teach8 is a good plug for Nadeem and what his team is doing, because a great Canadian company doing some awesome work exactly in that space.
Definitely, I will do that.
Yeah, we'll make sure we take care of our own there for sure. So that's awesome, Brad. Now, if we now shift to the district perspective. So now you're putting back on your old administrator hat with all that you've learned now, right? Like when you left and got into the EdTech world some 20 years ago, what advice would you give your old self? Would you give a school or district administrator?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I appreciate your time to kind of talk a little bit about that. Number one is, what is the ultimate goal of the company? Is it, this is going to sound simplified and obvious, but is it there to make money? Is it there to improve the lives of educators and students? Now, every company is going to tell you they're designed to improve the lives of educators and students. The question then comes in is, how are you doing that? What are you doing and what is your tool, and how does your tool meet that individual need? So, for example, what are they doing to put teachers and students first and foremost? Is it going through that process of really building systems that take some of that repetitive load, the lesson planning, grading, basic content delivery off their hands, so that students can do that high impact human work, that part where they're going to go through and really spend time coaching, mentoring kids, building a relationship with their kids, helping them take in and do some of that one-on-one or small group instructional time. Those are areas that I think I would be looking for first and foremost.
Yeah.
The next area is kind of how do they address personalization and meeting the individual needs of kids. It in a lot of cases, it looks very similar in a lot of companies, but it's really a different beast altogether if it's done well. Because what it's doing is, in a lot of situations, I see folks saying, we've got a great individualized program here that's going to really meet the needs of kids. But if you look at the data and what tasks kids are actually doing, it's really putting everything down into the middle. It's putting things down to a simple middle versus truly individualizing. So I want to see the data. I want to see the information of, okay, when a child's really behind or really ahead, what is it doing to adjust and accommodate those individual needs? And how do you track that information? How do you see that information? How do my teachers know what's happening with those kids? How are they still involved in the instructional process of those kids? Because it's very easy, especially for my high flyers or even for the students who are struggling a little bit, to go and put them into a device that allows them to go at the fastest pace they possibly can without any teacher interaction, and just allow the kid to move through without really diving into, hey, are there gaps in learning? Are there areas that we need to be addressing? Are there areas that may come up later on? I mean, we all think about, math skills. Math skills, if you're not built at a certain level to a certain degree of understanding, not just from a standpoint of, hey, can you do the math? But do you understand conceptually what's happening with the math? And if you don't have the conceptual understanding, it doesn't matter if you can do the rote processes, because the conceptual piece is going to catch you. May not catch you in third grade. It may not catch you in fifth grade. But when you get into geometry or calculus and trig, it's going to catch you very quickly that you've missed a foundational piece of that core understanding from a conceptual standpoint.
Right.
So looking for those pieces.
Yeah. So there's some qualitative kind of research that districts have to do, not only the quantitative of, okay, scores and usage and that piece, but they've got to, alongside presumably principals and teachers, really try to understand the impact that that tool or device or tech is having on the kids. The districts that have had really innovative tech adoptions that you've worked with, is there any secret sauce that they have? Is there anything that they do that's special? And maybe this is a question about the structure and the frequency of the teams that vet the tech and what that process is like. I feel, you and I, and certainly more you than I, have seen hundreds and thousands of adoptions all across the world, right? And they all kind of look different. And it's always amazed me how some districts will adopt very quickly without much kicking the tires, although that's more rare. And then other districts have a long, arduous process at the onset, and then it's almost just like turned off around implementation, and it's not this continuous cycle. So that's a long way of asking, what are the districts that adopt tech in innovative ways do really well that you've worked with?
First and foremost, they have a plan. Here's the vision of what I want Edtech to do, and here's what I want it to look like in my classrooms. This goes back to that conversation we had a little bit earlier about, with kids and the amount of screen time and what tasks what they're being done, what they're doing with the technology. And districts who have a really solid foundation, they're not worried about, hey, you know what? They're only clicking this tool, this many times. That's not the focus. What's the outcome because they're using that task? It doesn't matter if you use it 6 times. If you get great outcomes, that's a great resource. If you're using it 100 times and you're not getting any results, it's not doing you any good. And so they have a plan in place to say, okay, here's where we want to go. Here's what we want the technology to do. Here's where our struggles are. They have an honest conversation with themselves at a district level. Here's where we're missing areas of instructional opportunities for kids. And so having that foundation, laying out that framework of honest conversation with our district leaders, saying these are the areas of improvement for our district. Now, can we find technology and resources to help fill that gap? And having that honest conversation of, is the technology what's going to improve that, that gap or improve that area of struggle for us? And again, back to that, analogy from Jurassic Park. Could we and should we? If it's not something we need to do to use technology to improve that, gap that we have, then they don't look for technology. They find something else to fill that gap. And it could be professional learning. It could be working through their district on instructional planning and resources, or maybe it's different materials they need access to. But they have that honest conversation and can really look at, instead of looking for a quick fix. What I see a lot of times is they see a report that comes out from the state and we'll call it my state in here in this North Carolina, and it comes out saying, hey, kids' scores in math or reading or science are down. Now we got to go find something to fill that gap. And our scores are down, so let's figure out what we're going to do. Without having any plan, they just go and buy something, and they just figure out, I'm going to stick this in there to fill that void. And if they don't have the conversation about what is the void, what is it really being caused by, and where are the areas we can improve on intentionally ourselves, and then where can we use some other resource to bring that in? Those districts who have that conversation internally first, those are the districts that are much more successful, and they end up finding the right tool for them and for their district versus jumping to your point a minute ago. They go through, they buy this, they get the implementation. It doesn't implement well for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's on the district side, sometimes on the company side. There's a lot of different ways that can happen, but they end up not using it. And so now they've spent anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million on content that's just not being utilized, and we're just throwing money out the window. And we get sometimes a bad rap, and sometimes we get a good rap in education for throwing money out the window or at problems. And sometimes it's well deserved, because sometimes we don't do the research and have the conversations we need to have ahead of time.
I think that's a good opportunity now to turn to the enormous hype around AI right now. And from a district standpoint, how would you suggest leaders distinguish between AI that can be really transformative and AI that's just noise or just marketing?
Yeah, so I think part of it is having the conversation with a company about what is their goal and their intentionality with the AI. What are they looking to do with the AI, and what is it doing for the teachers and the students? And a place that has a clear vision for that can lay that out really in a strong formative way. They can say, this is our goal. This is what we want to improve. This is how we're going to improve it. This is what we're going to be doing with it. And then they're going to have data and research that's going to back up why that's important. And they're going to be able to also share anecdotal pieces with teachers who've told them this is what they need and this is why they need it and this is how it's improving their lives. And so getting into those that piece there, I've seen way too many companies go in and just start building AI because they have to have something for AI to have that conversation, because districts are saying, what are you doing with AI in your product? And if they're saying nothing, then districts start turning them off. To the district, you don't need to just say, you know what, you have to have AI to be even in the conversation. It's not always needed in every situation for every solution out there. So have that conversation with the partner, with the EdTech company about how it's being utilized, what it's doing. And again, back to what I talked a little bit earlier about. How is it, and in what ways is it impacting the teacher from a standpoint of providing them more of that human time with a student versus another way to get kids on a device, or a teacher on a device or the kids on a device with the teacher, any of those pieces that is not necessarily great instructional time always. So making sure we look at those pieces and making sure we look at the qualitative and the quantitative results of what's happening with the use of AI in the classroom.
So what systems would you say need to be in place before they even think about adopting AI tools, whether it be professional development, policy? What would you suggest they think about before even going down the route of finding tools either on the operations side or on the teaching and learning side?
Oh, I think definitely no matter what you're doing, especially with AI and what's happening with AI, is have a firm district plan in place for what privacy and restrictions you want to have on AI. From a data standpoint, from your district standpoint, from a standpoint of student interaction and student engagement, so that you have a plan in place for how AI is going to be implemented in your school and in your district. Because it's kind of a little bit right now the wild, wild west of AI. And everybody's out there using it, everyone's doing it, and they're not always having some kind of necessarily guardrails put up in place to say, okay, wait a minute, we need to make sure our kids are safe, we need to make sure our information's safe, the instructional practices are safe within our classrooms and in our districts. And so having a really kind of clearly defined process for how AI is being utilized before I'd go anywhere with AI in my district right now. And then once I have that in place, now I'm looking for partners who their model fits our model for what plan we put in place.
Awesome. My penultimate question for you. If you could give, and it's kind of a two-parter, but if you could give one piece of uncomfortable advice to district leaders and one to EdTech founders, what would they be?
Uncomfortable advice. Wow. So for let's go EdTech providers first, if that's all right. For EdTech providers, get out of your head and get out of your way. Too many EdTech providers, you have this vision, you have this plan of what you want to build and how it's going to impact students. Step away and bring in the teachers, bring in the district leaders, have the uncomfortable conversation. Someone telling you, you know what, that looks really cool. I don't need it and I won't use it. And it's okay to hear that up front. Why build something and create something that's not going to be needed or not going to be used? It's wasted time, energy, money that can be used for something that would be utilized in a more efficient and effective way by teachers and students. Have that conversation. And also have that, the other part of that is have that conversation with yourself is, should we be doing this? Not can we do it? Because, and if it should, how is it improving the lives of educators and students? Not in the sense of making the job just easier, but providing more time for students to have one-on-one instructional time or meaningful instructional time with the teacher not with a device. If it's providing more time with a device, kids are on devices all day, every day. They don't need more time on a device. They need more time with the teacher instructionally and to be able to really meet the needs of where they are currently performing at this time.
Awesome. And for the
building level, or district level?
Yeah.
So for district levels, the first piece is, have that honest conversation with yourself. Where are the challenges in your district? Be willing to look at yourself intentionally and internally and saying, hey, maybe our gaps are because of something we're not delivering for our teachers or for our district level or our building level folks that are meeting needs, or maybe we're not meeting our students' needs because we've got a blind spot to an area. And be willing to really pull back the covers and say, oh, that's a black eye, and we need to figure out a way to solve it. And once you identified it, then have the conversations. Again, I go back to always the folks that are in the field every single day that are having the impact and are going to have the greatest impact on your students' outcomes are the teachers day in and day out. Have a conversation with your teachers about what is it they need. What tools have they started to find and utilize? Because teachers are great. They're amazing at finding tools that I never heard of. They bring them to me and say, hey, have you checked this out? Does it mean I buy everything they check out? No. But now we can have a conversation and say, okay, what is this doing? Well, we've got this already that does that. And if that's not serving a purpose, do we need to switch? Or maybe you didn't even know that could do it. And make sure you have those conversations. But once you've identified areas of gaps and challenge that you can address, now go out and have a conversation with the districts and the content providers and say, okay, where is it we can go to find this, and where can we, who is doing the best job in this? And then start looking at the other piece of that process is, and this is an uncomfortable conversation to have sometimes with a potential partner that you're going to work with, is where's the data and how much data can you share with me? And then also always have a conversation with another existing partner of that company, multiple ones if you can. If they're only going to offer you one or two, that's a red flag to me. If they're going to offer you the world of people to talk to, that's a good sign of a company that really believes in what they're doing day in and day out.
Awesome. And Brad, my last question is always, what book, podcast, movie, music album are you recommending? I know you've always got something cool on the go, so you can name as many as you'd like.
Yeah, so hang on here. I'm going to reach across the screen here. Apologize. Book I highly recommend. So I apologize. There go that way. Make It Stick. Highly recommend it. Great book on really what we can do instructionally to get content and students to really remember and even ourselves to remember the key components of what we're trying to learn at any point in time. So that's a great book. On the pleasure side, I read all the time. So this one's just pure pleasure reading, folks. There's nothing meaningful in this, but I am a huge fan right now of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. If you have not read it, it is a lot of fun if you're into that kind of thing. It's a lit RPG, which I didn't even know existed. So it's the new whole genre for me. So those are two things. And then if there's I'm watching the Olympics right now. Let's just be candid. I'm an Olympic junkie. I'm a sports junkie. So nice. The Olympics have my attention right now.
Well, this will almost certainly air before the Canadian men's team whips the U.S. team. So, and if not, we'll have to do some editing here. But I'm pretty confident that we're gonna bring the game to you this time around. So,
my only comment is yesterday we did all right with the women's team. So
Yeah. Our captain was injured.
Okay, that's fair.
So anyway, it's okay. We'll see how that all turns out. But Brad Fountain, thank you very much for your time, my friend.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.